Hey everybody, this is Russ from Retro Gamecore. About a month ago, I reviewed a device named the Super Console X, and today we're going to look at the Super Console X Pro. Now, in addition to having the new name added to it, there are a couple changes that have happened between the X and the X Pro, so I want to discuss that today. But I'll just go ahead and get this out of the way first. If you are deciding between buying the X and the X Pro, unless there is a huge price difference between the two, I would recommend getting the Pro. And in today's video, I'll show you all the differences between the two, and then talk about gameplay with it, and some of the additional features on the Pro which make it a little bit more of a compelling buy. Overall, I think both of these devices are really interesting in the fact that you basically just have these plug-and-play TV boxes for gaming. And even though there are better solutions out there, I really enjoy these two devices because they come with everything you need right in the box, so all you have to do is just plug it into your TV and start enjoying games right away. And in the world of retro game emulation, that is hard to come by. So without any further delay, let's look at the Super Console X Pro. Okay, let's start off with some specs here. This device runs an S905X chipset, and it's a slightly different chip from the original console. It is turbocharged to 1.512 GHz, which gets about a 3 or 4% faster benchmark over the original Super Console X. But other than this small tweak, it's basically the same chipset as the one that's in the original Super Console X. In terms of functionality, it has two USB 2.0 ports, Ethernet, HDMI, AV out, as well as Wi-Fi. One note here is I don't have an AV capable TV, so I was not able to test that one feature. One unique thing about the Super Console X Pro is that it has the ability to dual boot into both EmuELEC for retro gaming, as well as Android for a TV box experience. So that means that you could go and play your retro games, or then dual boot into Android to watch Netflix or play on Kodi or anything else like that. We'll get into that later. Like I mentioned earlier, both of these consoles are just ready to play out of the box. They're preloaded with a bunch of retro games. They have two controllers which are just okay, and then it has an HDMI cable that you can plug directly into your TV or monitor. Now the Super Console X Pro has a couple extra goodies. It comes with a TV remote for when you're using the Android side of the device. It also comes with an external USB hub, so you can plug in more than just the two typical controllers. And then it also had this mysterious extra 4GB SD card. And when I plugged it in, I found that it was basically a manual. It had all sorts of how-to guides, videos, as well as some fundamental files in case you need to reflash a new SD card. I thought this was a really thoughtful touch. Okay, let's get started with a quick unboxing here. Now I ordered this device via AliExpress, which ships directly from China, and it's a lot cheaper that way. I can get it for about $70 that way. Now they also sell it on Amazon for about $100, and you can get it much more quickly. And as you can see, my box was totally dinged up. Luckily, all the contents were fine. Inside, the first thing I saw was that 4GB manual SD card. Here are the two controllers here. We'll get into those later. There's also a manual inside. I don't think you're going to need it. It also comes with an external USB hub, TV remote, HDMI cable, as well as your power outlet. And then here's the device itself. The device feels very cheap and plasticky, but it's not something you're going to be holding in your hands very often. The SD card that comes preloaded with it is a generic SD card. So you're probably going to want to back up this image and put it on a different SD card that's a little bit more reliable, something from SanDisk or maybe Samsung. So just a quick comparison of the Super Console X and the Super Console X Pro, you can see they're exactly the same. In the Super Console X, you can see here I've added my own SD card. Let's take a look at the controller for a minute. Now this is basically a PS2 style controller. It feels very light and cheap. One thing I really don't like about it is the D-pad. I wish it didn't have these separated D-pad buttons here. The analog sticks are okay. I think they'll probably wear down over time. Very simple. It has an on and off switch. I like these shoulder buttons. They're a little bit mushy, but they're still really responsive. And same thing with the face buttons. I don't mind them. This just feels like one of those cheap generic PS2 controllers that you used to see back in the early 2000s. One note is that it requires AAA batteries, so you got to bring your own juice. Now, if you're looking for an alternative, I would recommend the SN30 Pro from 8BitDo. This is a Bluetooth controller, and it works on a number of devices. I use this thing all the time. It's about $50 altogether. Now, the Super Console X Pro does not have Bluetooth, so you're going to want to use something like this 8BitDo wireless adapter. This is an additional $20. and it just plugs right into the device itself. So admittedly, it's a little bit unwieldy looking, but I really do like this controller. I love the face buttons on it, and so it's a good alternative if you're looking at investing into better controls. Now in terms of testing for this video, I only used the controllers that came with the device, but I did want to show you this option that you have available to you. Okay, let's do a quick teardown and see if we can see any differences between these two devices. So the Pro is on the left and the regular one's on the right. The first thing I noticed is that the Pro does not have an optical port. What I find interesting is that the Console X does have an optical option, but it's not in the actual port of the device. So it may have been something they planned on implementing and then never actually did, and so they just took it out of the Pro altogether. Either way, don't expect to have optical out with the X Pro. Now even though both of these chips only have 1 GB of RAM, the Console X Pro actually modified it down so it's just one single RAM chip, which means they may be able to expand it to 2 GB later on. And that's a good thing because I think 1 GB of RAM is one of the biggest limiting factors of this device. Other than the Wi-Fi chip, which you can see here sticks out like a sore thumb on the original one, and I actually couldn't find it on the Pro. I'm not sure if that's it or if it's somewhere else hidden. And then obviously the Pro has a much larger heatsink here. That's probably because it's turbocharged, so it generates a little bit more heat. And there's no active cooling on this device, so it will get a little bit hot. Either way, I'm not seeing a lot of fundamental differences between these two devices, other than the slight change with the chipset and the heatsink. So let's do a quick comparison between the Console X and the Console X Pro. We'll start with what they have in common there in the middle. They have the same ports, so USB, HDMI, AV out, they have Ethernet and Wi-Fi, and they both come with the same two controllers, as well as an HDMI cable. If you shop for them on AliExpress, you can find them for about $70, and I'll have a link in the description below. But if you want to buy them on Amazon and have them shipped to you much more quickly, you're going to pay a premium. It's going to be about $100 for one of these. So it's really going to be up to you. Do you want to pay $70 and wait a month, or do you want to pay $100 and wait like 2 days? Now the Super Console X has an S905M chip which runs at 1.5 GHz, and it runs an older version of EmuELEC, 3.5. And on either of these devices you could actually upgrade EmuELEC to 4.0, but because that runs in a 16-bit user space, it has a higher overhead which requires more RAM, and because it only has 1 GB of RAM, I would recommend staying at 3.9 or below when it comes to EmuELEC. Now if you take the SD card out on the original Super Console X, it will boot into Android, and it's a very old version of Android, 4.4.2. And it may have some sort of onboard storage in order to store this Android. I'm not really sure because most of the menus are in Chinese. I'll show it to you later. Now on the other side, Super Console X Pro has a slightly upgraded chip. It ships with EmuELEC 3.9, which is the most modern version of EmuELEC before 4.0. And then it runs Android 7.1.2, and it has 8 GB of onboard storage. This allows you to do things like video streaming, so you can watch Netflix or YouTube, things like that. You can also do game streaming, so you could stream via Steam Link or Moonlight or AMD Link. And then also you could do some light gaming on Android apps. Basically, you have access to everything you can get in the Google Play Store that runs on Android 7. And then, like I mentioned before, there are a couple extra pack-ins, so a remote control for watching the TV apps, and then a 4 GB microSD card, which is a backup for all sorts of files as well as video tips. So yeah, like I mentioned at the start of the video, if you have the option to buy either the Pro or the non-Pro, and they're about the same price, I would go for the Pro. You're probably not going to see a huge amount of performance gains between that slightly upgraded chipset, and even if you don't use the Android side of the device, it still comes with a couple extra perks. Okay, now I'm going to plug the device into my capture card, and I'm actually going to show you the experience of first booting it up. So because it has the SD card inside of it, it's going to boot right into EmuELEC. And here's what it looks like out of the box. You can see it's loaded with a ton of games. For example, there's 1,200 Super Nintendo games. And I'm not going to go through every single system that's listed here, but it is a lot. If you have any obscure games that you're trying to play, chances are at least the system's available and maybe the game's already preloaded too. And it's very easy to add your own games. So if you're connected to the internet, you can go into the updates and downloads section, and then the themes downloads. And then you can choose a bunch of different themes to download and install to improve your EmuELEC experience. For this video today, I'm going to use a theme called Crystal. It looks really nice on a big TV. And this is what it looks like here. Okay, so jumping into gameplay here, I'm going to start with some of the easier systems first and then I'll work my way up. As expected, games like Nintendo work just fine. And as you can see here, it has system level bezels on the sides of the screen. I really like these kind of bezels because it takes away from those big black bars that you would typically see when trying to play a 4:3 aspect ratio game on a 16:9 display. The NES library is very comprehensive, so for the most part every game you want to play is already loaded on here. In terms of Super Nintendo, everything I played worked really well. All the way from games which are easy to run like Super Mario Kart, to some of the harder ones like Super Mario World 2. Everything ran really smoothly. And I didn't mess with any settings or anything like that. This is just running the regular SNES 9X core. This is one of the things I really love about this device, is that you don't have to do a lot of tweaking. You can see here that even Star Fox runs really smooth. Now my gameplay is terrible, but the game itself is running fine. I'm not going to spend a lot of time showcasing handheld devices because they look a little bit weird on a TV, but you can see here that Game Boy Advance runs just fine. One nice thing about Game Boy Advance is that it has a slightly wide screen already with 3:2 aspect native ratio, and so because of that you get to use up a lot of the screen while you're playing. Moving over to Sega here, you can see that Genesis plays just great. Here's Aladdin, and then here's Streets of Rage 2. Moving up to slightly more challenging systems here, here's the Sega 32X running Knuckles Chaotix. This game is so weird. I don't know why they made it, and I don't know what's up with it. Like, there's this rhinoceros thing, and then there's like a metal Sonic. Like, I don't know anything about Sonic lore. This is just weird. Okay, and rounding out that early 90s Sega era is the Sega CD, and this runs just fine too. Moving over to arcade here, you have two options. You have Final Burn Neo as well as MAME games. Final Burn Neo games were running just great. These are really tailored towards the fighting game market, but in general I found no slowdown with any of the games. Now one odd thing I did find is that MAME games are actually set to run with the Final Burn Neo core. So you need to go into the game settings within the main menu, and then go to Per System Advanced Configuration, and then scroll all the way down till you find Arcade MAME, and then change the emulator to MAME 2003 Plus. This one has the widest compatibility, and it appears that the ROM set that's on the device is actually a MAME 2003 ROM set anyway. To give you an example here, I tried to play Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 using the default emulator of Final Burn Neo, and it ran about 35 to 40 frames per second. But changing it to MAME 2003 Plus, it runs at the native 53 frames per second. So it runs just great now. In general, I would recommend using MAME for all of your non-fighting arcade games. So games like The Simpsons or Ninja Turtles, X-Men, things like that, they're going to play really well on MAME. Okay, moving over to PS1, here's Crash Team Racing, and it's running perfectly. It's running at about 59-60 frames per second at all times. And just like with the original Super Console X, I feel like this could actually be pushed a little bit further. So I'm going to jump into the RetroArch quick menu by hitting Select and Y. I'm going to go down to Options, and then I'm going to turn on Enhanced Resolution, as well as the Enhanced Resolution Speed Hack. Now, jumping back into the game, you can see they've doubled the resolution of 3D sprites, and it looks much more clear and nicer. This is basically running at 480p now, and it's still buttery smooth, 60 frames per second. So if you're going to play a lot of PS1 games, I would recommend turning on that enhanced resolution. Okay, moving on to some of the really challenging systems, let's start with Sonic Adventure 2. It's already configured to run 480p out of the box, and you can see here it runs really well. Not every Dreamcast game is going to be perfect, but for the most part, I would say 75% of them are going to run really smooth. Now, Atomic Wave is an arcade system that runs off of Dreamcast hardware. Most of these games run really well, although there are some challenges with games like Dolphin Blue, which are a little bit more demanding. This one has some audio stuttering, as well as a little bit of slowdown. Now, Nintendo 64 is always hard to emulate, and it's kind of a mixed bag with this device too. Here I am running F-Zero with a 480p resolution, and there's some definite slowdown here. I'd say you're getting about a 20% slowdown, so an 80% gameplay. But if I configure it to have only 240p resolution, so low resolution, I'm getting a full 60 frames per second. So if you want some good Nintendo 64 gameplay, you're going to have to mess around with the settings just a little bit. Now, not every game needs tweaking. For example, here's Mario Kart 64 running at 480p, and it's running just fine. But this one has always been a little bit easier to emulate than other games. So if you're going to buy this device specifically for Nintendo 64, just bear in mind you'll have to do a little bit of tweaking. Same goes with the PSP. In general, you can play a lot of 2D games, but when you try to play 3D games, you're going to see some slowdown. Okay, let's move on to the Android side of the device. Now, to get into the Android side, all you have to do is remove the SD card and then turn the device back on. And this is the splash screen you're going to see. Now jumping in here, you're going to see a very Android TV experience. You can go into My Apps and see what apps are already pre-installed. You can see Netflix and YouTube are already there. So jumping into YouTube, it's a little bit slow, but it's pretty easy to just go to your favorite channel like Retro Game Core and check out some videos. For example, if you wanted to watch the original Super Console X review, you could do that right there on your device. That would probably be the most meta way you could watch this review, and that's pretty cool. Okay, getting back to the interface, you can see that Kodi is already loaded on this device as well. So if you're into media streaming and using these add-ons and things like that, this is a way you could do it. And like we saw earlier, Netflix is loaded on here as well. Now I didn't sign into my own Netflix account, but my assumption here is it's only going to play at 480p because a lot of these Chinese-made Android boxes can't run at a high resolution of Netflix due to licensing issues and things like that. Now you could jump into the Google Play Store as well and download whatever apps you want. Just bear in mind this is the Android 7 version of the Google Play Store. But some games, for example Horizon Chase, which has been out for about 6 years now, can be downloaded. So let me show you what it's like to run an Android game. So I honestly think that the 1GB of RAM is the limiting factor in playing games on this device. In general, I found it to be pretty laggy when I was playing this game. I was still able to play it moderately well, but I wouldn't expect to play a bunch of Android games on this device. But it's kind of cool for a tech demo. Now if we really wanted to get in the weeds here, you could actually install emulators on this device and then plug in a separate SD card and then load those games through the emulator on the Android side of the device. I don't think you're going to see any improved performance over what you can find in EmuELEC, but I wanted to at least show you this as a proof of concept. So here I am going into my SD card and starting up Super Mario World. And yeah, sure enough it plays, and actually it plays really well. I was expecting to see a lot of lag when I was playing this game, but honestly I didn't feel much at all. But like I said, you're probably better off just playing games through the EmuELEC side of the device. Okay, let's try out game streaming here. So I've installed the AMD Link, and I'm connecting to my PC here. And on my PC, I've already configured it for Big Box, which is a version of Launchbox. So then I can run emulation off my PC onto the Super Console X. So if your PC is on the other side of the house from your TV, you could essentially plug in your Super Console X Pro and then play emulated games from your PC on your TV in your living room. Now while I'm streaming here, I'm actually connected via Ethernet, and it's not perfect gameplay. You can see there's a little bit of hiccups. And the streaming itself is not very high quality either. So when it comes down to it, I think that 1GB of RAM is still limiting this device when it comes to some of these features like game streaming or Android games. But it is kind of neat to have these options on the Pro, which aren't available on the other one. For example, here's the same thing on the Super Console X. I've taken out the SD card and I've booted it into the Android side. And as you can tell, I can barely navigate anything because I don't read Chinese. You can actually go into the settings and change the language to English, but it only actually changes the language for the settings themselves. So still when you're navigating the apps and everything else, it's still all in Chinese. But as you can see here, it's running Android 4.4.2. And it's basically unusable on the Super Console X. So I do appreciate that the Console X Pro at least has a usable version of Android. Now if you plug in your EmuELEC SD card into your computer, you can find all your game folders within the games partition. And here you can add your BIOS files and your games and everything else here. You can even go and delete all the ones you don't want and add your own personal games to it. But what I found really interesting was the 4GB SD card that comes in the box. It comes with all sorts of user guide videos, which are kind of helpful actually. And they have a voiceover and subtitle in English. And so I really appreciate that they have these guides. And just like with anything, there are some translation issues with these guides and things like that, but I still think it's pretty helpful to have these available to you. You can also find the PDF of the user manual in case you lose it and want to read up on it. And it also has some system recovery tools available as well as some tips for you. Okay, wrapping up things here, I just want to talk a little bit about whether or not this is worth your money. And I already talked about this at length during my Super Console X video last month, but at the end of the day, I think this is a really great device for somebody who wants a plug-and-play experience for retro gaming on their TV. Yes, there are many other ways you can do this. You could use a Raspberry Pi, you could use an Android TV box and then soup it up yourself. You could even buy a mini PC and then just put it right next to your TV. But the fact that this is about $70 and comes pre-packaged with controllers as well as a TV remote and a USB hub and a HDMI cable and everything else, I think this is a really great value. So if you know someone who loves retro games but can't be bothered to set everything up, this is a really good introduction for them. And it definitely has its share of faults. I mean, it's a very cheap and plasticky feeling system. The controllers could definitely be better. But as a whole, I think for $70, this experience can't be beat. Alright everyone, that's it for this video. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful. And we will see you next time. Happy gaming!